I'm James Mitchell. I'm 38 years old, and I overheard my own father threatening my 8-year-old daughter to hide the bruises he gave her. Before I tell you how I exposed him in front of all his friends and colleagues and walked away forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know you're out there listening. It was supposed to be a night of triumph, a capstone on a life well lived. My father, Robert Mitchell, was hanging up his hard hat after 40 years. 40 years as a chief civil engineer, a man who built not just bridges and buildings in our corner of Ohio, but a reputation as solid as concrete. He was an institution, the kind of man whose handshake was a contract and whose word was gospel. That was the man I thought I knew. That was the man the whole town revered. The 8-hour drive was a grueling test of endurance, a blur of highway hypnosis and lukewarm coffee from a stained thermos. I kept my arrival a secret. I had this picture in my head. I'd walk in, he'd be surrounded by well-wishers, and I'd be the surprise ace up his sleeve. But the real reason for the punishing drive, the ache in my lower back, and the sandpaper feeling behind my eyes, was my daughter, Lily. It had been 3 long months, 94 days to be exact. I counted every single one. Each mile that clicked by on the odometer was one less mile between me and her. The thought of her smile was the only fuel I needed. When I finally pulled onto my parents' street, the house was a beacon of light and life. Cars overflowed from the driveway, lining both sides of the road. Through the big bay window, I could see a crowd of people, silhouettes moving in a warm, golden light. The low, pleasant hum of celebration, laughter, music, the clinking of glasses, drifted out into the cool June air. It smelled exactly as I remembered. My mother's prize-winning roses from the garden, mingling with the rich, savory scent of a roast beef dinner. It was the smell of home, the smell of safety. I decided against the front door, opting for the familiar side entrance that led past the kitchen. A little bit of stealth to maximize the surprise. The hallway was dimmer, a quiet artery away from the beating heart of the party in the living room. As I crept past the kitchen doorway, I heard them, my father and my daughter. I paused, a wide, genuine smile finally breaking across my tired face, my hand lifting to push the swinging door open. That's when I heard it. Not the words themselves at first, but the tone. It was a sound I had never heard from my father, not in all my 38 years. It wasn't the voice of a loving grandfather. It was a low, menacing hiss, a blade of ice sliding through the warm, festive air. Smile, and don't say a word about the bruises. The smile on my face didn't just fade. It shattered. The air punched out of my lungs, and my hand froze in the air, inches from the door. Every muscle in my body went rigid. If your daddy finds out, that venomous whisper continued, you will find out what real punishment feels like when he leaves again. No one will hear you. Do you understand me? A tiny, choked sound, barely audible. Yes, Grandpa. I was paralyzed in the shadows, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped animal. The man in that kitchen was a complete stranger. The man I knew, the local hero, my father, didn't exist. He was a phantom, a carefully constructed illusion. And the man in his place, the one whose voice was dripping with cruelty, he was a monster. In that single, horrifying beat of time, the entire foundation of my world crumbled to dust. I was home, but I had just stumbled into the heart of a nightmare. And the first question that clawed its way through my shock was a terrifying one. What does a man do when he discovers the monster he's been running from his whole life has been living in his own father's skin? To understand why I didn't just crash through that door, roaring with a rage that was already boiling in my veins, you have to understand the fog. You have to understand the 2 years I'd spent lost in it. You have to understand Emma. My wife, Emma, wasn't just a person. She was my center of gravity. She had this laugh, this incredible, uninhibited laugh, that could make the darkest day feel bright. She saw the good in everything and everyone, especially me. We weren't just a couple. We were a unit, a 3-person team against the world. Emma, Lily, and me. It was a simple, perfect equation. My entire universe was contained within that small, loving circle. 2 years ago, that universe imploded. It was a Tuesday, a rainy, forgettable Tuesday in April until a dump truck driver, distracted by his phone, blew through a red light, and in a screech of metal and a shatter of glass, my life as I knew it was over. 1 minute, I was an architect sketching out blueprints for buildings. The next, I was a widower, a single father to a 6-year-old girl whose world had been stolen from her. Grief isn't a feeling. It's a place, a desolate, gray landscape where nothing grows. And I was lost in it. I was trying to navigate my own suffocating sorrow while simultaneously trying to be a lifeboat for my daughter, who was adrift in the same storm. I'd find her in her closet, clutching one of Emma's old cardigans, trying to inhale the last faint traces of her mother's scent. I'd jolt awake at 3 a.m. to the sound of her whimpering in her sleep, calling for a mommy who would never answer. I was failing her. Every single day, I felt myself failing her, failing the memory of my wife. I remembered a promise, one that haunted my waking hours. A few months before the accident, Emma had a bad case of the flu. She was lying in bed, looking small and fragile, and she grabbed my hand. Her eyes were serious. "Jamie," she'd said, her voice raspy, "if anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll make sure Lily is always safe. Promise me you'll never let her feel alone." I had smiled, stroked her hair, and told her she was being silly, that she'd outlive us all. But I promised, Em, always. That promise, once a light-hearted reassurance, now felt like a lead weight chained to my soul, pulling me down into the depths. About 6 months after she was gone, my firm came to me with a once-in-a-career opportunity, a chance to be the lead architect on a new modern art museum on the West Coast. It was a monumental project, the kind of thing architects dream of, but it was all-consuming. It meant relocating, working 18-hour days, and constant, high-stakes travel. I couldn't do it. How could I tear Lily away from the only home she'd known? From the school where her teachers were patient and kind, from her friends, from the familiar comfort of her grandparents who lived just 10 minutes away. That's when my parents, Robert and Patricia, presented themselves as the perfect solution. "Son, let us carry some of this burden," my father had said, placing a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. His voice was laced with a deep, paternal concern that felt like a lifeline. "This is what family does. You go build a future for you and Lily. We'll give her the stability she needs right now, a solid routine, a home filled with love. We need her as much as she needs us." My mother, Patricia, was the master closer. She'd enfold me in a hug that smelled of safety and lavender soap, her voice a soothing balm on my raw nerves. "Think of it, Jamie. She'll be here with us. Your brother Mark is just down the road. You know how she adores him. We won't change a thing for her. Same school, same friends, same bedroom. It's the best thing for her, honey. It's what Emma would have wanted." That was the knockout blow. It's what Emma would have wanted. Of course, Emma would want her daughter to be happy and secure, not dragged across the country by a grieving, shell-shocked father who could barely remember to eat, let alone be a fully present parent. My guilt was a constant, buzzing companion, so I sought external validation. I called Sarah Reynolds, my best friend since we were 5, now a respected pediatrician in Cleveland. I laid it all out for her on a crackling phone line one night, my voice hollow with exhaustion and self-doubt. "Am I a terrible father for even thinking about this, Sarah? Am I abandoning my kid?" I could hear the deep sympathy in her sigh. "No, James, you're not a terrible father. You're a good man in an impossible situation. Honestly, a stable home, surrounded by family who loves her, while you get back on your feet and secure her future. It's a sound plan. It's probably the best of a lot of bad options right now. Just promise me you'll call her every single day, so she knows you're still there." Her professional, logical endorsement was the permission I needed. So I did it. I packed up my life, put my home in Ohio up for rent, and moved into a sterile, beige corporate apartment 3,000 miles away. Work became my drug. I poured every ounce of my being into steel beams and structural calculations, because it was easier than confronting the gaping void in my life. And I kept my promise to Sarah. I called every day. The first year and a half, it seemed to be working. I'd get daily updates from my mom, always cheerful. She ate all her vegetables today. She got an A on her spelling test. She misses her daddy, of course, but she's such a happy, resilient little girl. The video calls were the highlight of my day. Lily would proudly show me her latest crayon masterpiece or a tooth she'd lost. My dad would often pop into the frame, his face beaming, waving with a hearty, "Hey there, champ." He was the perfect, doting grandfather. I sent money home like clockwork, a generous amount that more than covered her expenses. I wanted them to want for nothing. My contribution, my penance. Every 6 to 8 weeks, I would fly back for a long weekend. Those visits were a whirlwind of parks, ice cream, and bedtime stories. I tried to cram a month's worth of fatherhood into 48 hours. Leaving was always brutal. The last time I left, 3 months ago, Lily had clung to me at the airport security line, her small body racked with sobs. "Please don't go, Daddy," she'd pleaded, her voice muffled against my jacket. It had felt like ripping off a limb, but a major project deadline loomed. A concrete pour that couldn't be rescheduled. "I'll be back before you know it, sweet pea," I'd whispered, my own voice thick with unshed tears. "I'll be home for Grandpa's big retirement party." And here I was, home, standing in this hallway, listening to the echoes of that monstrous threat. My carefully constructed reality, my justification for leaving, it was all a lie. My trust hadn't just been misplaced. It had been a key I'd handed to the jailer. My mother's cheerful updates were a smokescreen. My father's doting grandfather act was a performance. I peered down the hall again, toward the living room. The party was in full swing. My mother was laughing, a crystal glass in her hand. My brother Mark was slapping my father on the back. Perfect family. A lie. The fog of grief that had clouded my judgment for 2 years finally began to burn away, scorched by the heat of a pure, white-hot rage. The promise I made to Emma screamed in my memory. I hadn't just failed her. I had personally delivered our daughter into the hands of the one person I should have been protecting her from. I looked at Lily, who had now rejoined the party and was standing awkwardly near the dessert table. She was wearing a beautiful dress with long, delicate sleeves. It was a warm evening, too warm for long sleeves, and I knew with a sickening certainty that the sleeves weren't a fashion choice. They were camouflage. My rescue mission had just begun, and it wouldn't be a quiet extraction. It would be a demolition. My body felt like it was moving through water. Every step was a conscious effort, a fight against the paralysis of shock and rage. I needed to get to Lily, but I had to be smart. I couldn't let them see the predator that had just been awakened inside me. Not yet. I watched her, my eyes never leaving her small form. She was a ghost at her own family's party, drifting at the edges, a small satellite in an orbit of forced cheerfulness. Finally, my opportunity came. My mother, Patricia, got cornered by an old neighbor eager to show off pictures of her new grandchild. Lily, seeing her chance to escape the spotlight, slipped out the back sliding glass door onto the dimly lit porch. I followed her instantly. The humid night air hit me like a wall, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled house. The scent of cut grass and blooming hydrangeas filled my lungs. Lily was standing by the porch railing, her small shoulders slumped, listlessly poking at a loose fleck of paint with her finger. She looked so incredibly small, so alone. "Hey, sweet pea," I said. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. She jumped and spun around. Her eyes, Emma's eyes, widened in disbelief, then flooded with a pure, uncontainable joy that was like a punch to my gut. "Daddy!" The word was a prayer. She flew across the deck and launched herself into my arms. I caught her, lifting her off the ground and burying my face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo. But underneath it there was something else, a faint, metallic scent of fear. She was trembling in my arms, not with excitement, but with a deep, shuddering tremor. I held on tight, trying to will my strength into her, trying to silently apologize for every second I had been away. I gently set her down, keeping my hands on her small, bony shoulders to steady us both. I missed you more than words can say, I managed, my throat thick. I missed you too, Daddy, she whispered, her gaze already dropping to the floor, the light in her eyes starting to dim. This was the moment, the point of no return. Lily? I started, forcing myself to keep my voice even. I was just inside, in the hallway. I heard what Grandpa said to you in the kitchen. It was like a switch had been flipped. The joy, the relief, it all vanished. Her face went ashen. The terror that flooded her eyes was primal and absolute. A terror no child should ever know. No, she breathed, her voice a tiny, broken thing. You weren't supposed to hear. Daddy, he'll be so mad. Hey, look at me. Right now. I commanded, my voice firm but gentle. I knelt, bringing myself down to her level, forcing her to meet my gaze. You are not in trouble. I am not mad at you. I will never be mad at you. I am here now. He will not touch you again. Ever. The dam broke. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks in silent, heartbreaking rivers. He told me you wouldn't love me anymore if I told anyone, she choked out. He said you'd think I was a bad girl and you wouldn't want to come home. A wave of pure, black rage crested inside me, so powerful it made my vision swim. I wanted to storm back into that house and tear my father apart with my bare hands. I shoved it down, burying it deep. She didn't need my rage. She needed my reassurance. That is the biggest lie anyone has ever told in the history of the world, I said, my voice shaking with the effort of controlling it. There is nothing you could ever do that would make me stop loving you. You are my entire world. You are the best thing in my life. Do you understand what I'm saying? She could only nod, her small body racked with sobs. My hand was trembling as I reached for her arm. Sweetheart, can you do something brave for me? Can you let Daddy see your arms? She flinched and pulled her arm back, her eyes darting fearfully toward the glass door. I can't, she whispered. Grandma said this dress is pretty. She said I should wear the long sleeves tonight. Grandma said. The confirmation was another twist of the knife. Please, Lily. For me. I just need to see. After a long moment of hesitation, she slowly, reluctantly, extended her arm. With fingers that felt clumsy and foreign, I gently took her small hand and pushed the lacy, frilly sleeve up her forearm. And then I saw it, and I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't one or two little bumps. It was a galaxy of cruelty mapped out on her delicate skin. There were angry, deep purple bruises that were clearly recent. There were older ones, faded to a sickly yellow-green. And there were ghost-like shadows of bruises that had healed long ago. The most damning, the ones that made me want to vomit, were the ones shaped like fingers. A perfect, brutal imprint of a large hand that had gripped my daughter's arm with vicious force. My carefully constructed composure crumbled. I had to turn my head away and bite down hard on the inside of my cheek, the sharp, metallic taste of my own blood flooding my mouth. It was the only thing that kept me from screaming. After a moment, I turned back to her. My voice was a dead, hollow thing. Who did this, Lily? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She stared at her own arm as if it belonged to a stranger. Grandpa, she whispered. He does it when I spill things, or when I don't eat my vegetables fast enough, or when I cry because I miss you. He says crying is for babies. The litany of her crimes was a series of hammer blows to my heart. And Grandma, I forced the words out. Does Grandma know? A single tear dripped off her chin. She nodded. She has the special cream. She puts it on at night. She calls it her magic erasing cream. She says if I'm a very good girl and don't make Grandpa get his temper up, I won't need it anymore. My stomach roiled. Patricia, my mother, the purveyor of magic erasing cream. She wasn't just covering for him. She was grooming the victim, teaching her that the abuse was a consequence of her own behavior. It was psychological warfare on an 8-year-old. What about Uncle Mark? I asked, my voice barely audible. Does he know? He saw once, she said, so quietly I had to lean in to hear. Grandpa was yelling, and he saw my arm. He told Grandpa to take it easy. Grandpa yelled at him really loud, said it was none of his business. Now when Grandpa gets mad, Uncle Mark just goes to his room. Mark, my brother, the golden child. He had tried once, and when he met resistance, he had retreated, choosing his own peace over his niece's safety. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just my father. It was the entire family unit, a toxic, closed system designed to protect the abuser at all costs. In that moment on the back porch, the full weight of my own culpability crashed down on me. It was a physical force, stealing the air from my lungs and making my knees weak. This wasn't just their fault. It was mine. I was the one who left. I was the one who put my career, my own inability to cope, ahead of her. I was the one who heard the subtle warnings in my mother's voice and chose to believe the comforting lies because the truth was too horrific to contemplate. My promise to Emma wasn't just broken. I had actively participated in its desecration. That suffocating guilt, however, quickly began to crystallize into something else. Something hard, sharp, and cold. Resolve. I gently rolled her sleeve back down, hiding the evidence. Okay, I said, my voice transformed. The tremor was gone, replaced by a low, steady calm that was more dangerous than any shouting. Listen to me very carefully, Lily. We are going back inside. You are going to stay glued to my side. Do you understand? Do not leave my side for any reason. As if on cue, the sliding glass door opened, and my mother stood there, her party hostess smile stretched tight across her face. There you are. We were just about to cut the cake. Jamie, what a wonderful surprise. Why on earth didn't you tell us you were coming? She moved to hug me, a cloud of expensive perfume enveloping us. I took a deliberate step back, out of her reach. The smile on her face faltered. A flicker of annoyance crossed her features before she quickly masked it. Lily, sweetheart, Mrs. Henderson has been asking for you. Run along and say hello. She's staying with me, I said. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. My mother's smile became a thin, hard line. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. James, don't be dramatic. She's been incredibly clingy lately. It's not healthy. She needs to learn to socialize. The sheer audacity of it, blaming the victim, pathologizing her fear right in front of her, was breathtaking. I repeated, my voice dropping to a near growl. She's staying with me. We held each other's gaze for a long moment. I saw it all there in her eyes. Denial, fear, and a dawning recognition that the game was up. She knew that I knew. She might not have known how, but she knew the secret was out. She was the first to look away, letting out a huffy, theatrical sigh. Fine, have it your way, but you're making a scene. She turned on her heel and glided back into the party, her posture radiating disapproval. I looked down at Lily, who was now clutching my index finger with her entire hand. I gave her a gentle squeeze, a silent promise. The opening skirmish was over. She didn't know it yet, but her father was finally home. And I wasn't here to negotiate. I was here to burn it all to the ground. Walking back into the belly of the beast was surreal. The party, which had seemed so warm and inviting just 30 minutes ago, now felt like a grotesque masquerade. Every laugh sounded hollow. Every smile felt like a lie. I was moving among them, a ghost with a purpose. My daughter's small hand a warm anchor in a swirling sea of deceit. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of shock and rage, was now unnervingly calm. The mission had clarified, crystallized into a single, sharp point. I needed to utterly and publicly dismantle my father's reputation, leaving him with no social capital, no credibility, and no power to ever come near my daughter again. Lily's whispered fear, "He'll find us, Daddy," was the engine driving my strategy. She was right. Robert Mitchell was a pillar of this community. A quiet disappearance would be a gift to him. He would weave a tale of a distraught son, unstable from grief, who had irresponsibly snatched his own child. He would be the victim, the concerned grandfather trying to save his granddaughter from her unstable father. He would call the police, he would call his lawyer, and he would use the weight of his 40-year reputation to crush me. I couldn't let that happen. The only way to win was to expose the truth in a forum where it could not be denied or spun. I had to turn his own party, his own tribute, into his public trial. My first move was to gather incontrovertible evidence. I led Lily to a quiet corner near the overloaded gift table. "Hey, sweet pea," I whispered, kneeling beside her and pulling out my phone. "I need you to be the bravest girl in the world for just one more minute. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, her eyes wide and trusting. "I need you to whisper to my phone, just like you whispered to me, just so I have it, so I don't forget a single word." I hit the record button on the video app, angling the phone so it just caught her face, her tear-streaked cheeks and trembling lip. It felt like a betrayal to document her pain, but it was a necessary evil. "Tell me again, honey," I prompted gently. "What did Grandpa do?" She leaned in close, her voice a fragile, heartbreaking whisper. He grabbed my arm, 'cause I spilled my milk on the rug. He squeezed it really hard and it shook it and said I was a bad, stupid girl." A fresh tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. I immediately stopped the recording. "That's it," I said, pulling her into a fierce hug. "You're done. You were perfect. You are the bravest person I know." I slid the phone into my pocket. Felt like it weighed 100 pounds. It was my closing argument. Next, I needed to prepare for our exit. A clean getaway with no loose ends. "I'll be right back," I told Lily, parking her on a stool by the kitchen with a fresh glass of lemonade. "Don't move from this spot." I slipped upstairs to what had once been my childhood bedroom. The walls were still covered in faded posters of bands I no longer listened to and pennants from teams I no longer followed. Felt like the room of a stranger. I found one of Lily's small backpacks, a pink one with a cartoon cat on it, in the closet from a previous visit. My movements were methodical, precise. I packed her things with a strange, cold detachment. Her favorite unicorn pajamas, her small, child-sized toothbrush, the floppy-eared, one-eyed teddy bear named Barnaby, a veteran of 1,000 bedtime battles. This shabby bear, I thought with a fresh surge of bitterness, had done more to protect her than her entire family. I added a couple of t-shirts, a pair of jeans, her favorite bedtime storybook, and the bottle of lavender-scented shampoo that always reminded me of her. It wasn't much, but it was her world in a bag. I shoved the backpack behind a heavy oak dresser, where no one would stumble upon it. As I descended the stairs, my eyes did a slow, deliberate sweep of the room. I was no longer just a guest. I was a general surveying the battlefield. I cataloged the faces. The mayor, my father's golf buddies, his former business partners, our next-door neighbors of 20 years. And then my eyes locked on her. Sarah, Dr. Sarah Reynolds, my oldest friend, the one I had called months ago, seeking her blessing for this very arrangement. My mother had mentioned offhandedly in a phone call last week that Sarah and her husband would be there. At the time, it was a pleasant footnote. Now, it was a divine intervention. My chaotic, rage-fueled plan suddenly snapped into sharp, tactical focus. I wasn't just an angry dad with a video on his phone. I was an angry dad with evidence, motive, and a credible expert witness already on site. The game had changed. I was making my way toward her when a hand clamped down on my shoulder. It was Mark. "Jamie, man, I can't believe it. You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, with that easy, clueless grin he always wore. "Why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I looked into his eyes, searching for any flicker of complicity, of knowledge. I found nothing but bland, fraternal bonhomie. He was a bystander, a coward who chose willful ignorance because it was easier. "I like to make an entrance, Mark," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "Well, you look pretty stressed for a guy at a party. You should grab a drink, relax," he suggested, slapping my back. The casualness of it, the utter obliviousness, was infuriating. "I'm fine," I said, pulling away from his touch. "Just a long drive." I reclaimed Lily from her post in the kitchen and kept her close. The moment was approaching. My father was now in the center of the living room, basking in the glow of his own retirement. My mother stood beside him, a proud, regal consort. They were royalty holding court. I pulled out my phone one last time, shielding the screen with my body. I sent a text to Sarah. Sarah, I am in serious trouble and I need your help. Something awful has happened. Please don't react. Just make your way over to the fireplace in the next 10 minutes. Just be there. Please. Trust me. I saw her glance down at her purse, her expression shifting for a nanosecond. She looked up, her eyes briefly meeting mine across the crowded room. She gave an almost imperceptible nod before turning back to her conversation. The fuse was lit. The players were in position. The audience was captive. The eye of the storm was passing, and I was about to unleash the whirlwind. The 10 minutes that followed were the longest of my life. I stood on the periphery of the living room, a ghost at the feast, with Lily's small hand clutching mine. My entire nervous system was on fire, a screaming symphony of adrenaline and dread. Every sound was magnified. The shrill laugh of a distant cousin, the dull clink of ice in a glass, the self-congratulatory drone of my father's voice. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of cake and hypocrisy. I felt like a soldier in a foxhole, waiting for the signal to go over the top. Finally, my father, his face flushed with champagne and adoration, tapped a knife against his glass, calling for silence. The room quieted. A sea of smiling, expectant faces turned toward him. Sarah was in place, standing near the massive stone fireplace, her expression carefully, professionally neutral. My friends, my wonderful family, my father began, his voice a rich baritone that commanded attention. He beamed, spreading his arms wide as if to embrace the entire room. Patricia and I, we are just overwhelmed. To look out and see all of you, all the people who have been a part of our journey. It's humbling. 40 years in a single profession is a long time. But I can tell you with all honesty, the greatest structures I ever helped build are not made of steel and concrete. They are right here in this room. My family, my incredible wife, my 2 fine sons, and of course, my beautiful, smart granddaughter, Lily. He raised his glass in her direction. To family, the room echoed. Lily tried to shrink behind my leg, to disappear. That was my cue. I took a steadying breath, a small squeeze of her hand, and I stepped out from the shadows. Dad, I said. My voice wasn't a shout, but it sliced through the celebratory murmur like a shard of glass. Conversations sputtered and died. Head after head turned in my direction, their expressions shifting from curiosity to confusion. My father's jovial mask remained perfectly in place. James, my boy, I was wondering where you were hiding. Come on up here. He was trying to absorb me, to neutralize the interruption by making it part of the performance. I can't do that, Dad, I said, my voice gaining strength and volume as I took a step forward. Not until we talk about something. I need to talk to you about why my 8-year-old daughter has bruises all over her arms. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the room. The silence that followed was absolute, a sudden vacuum where all the air and sound had been sucked out. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My father's smile didn't just fade. It was violently erased, leaving behind a cold, hard mask of fury. James, he said, his voice low and guttural. This is neither the time nor the place for your dramatics. On the contrary, I shot back, my own voice ringing with a terrible clarity. I think this is the perfect time and the perfect place. You just toasted to your family. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you really treat your family when you think no one is watching. My mother, Patricia, rushed to his side, her hands fluttering like wounded birds. James, for heaven's sake, what are you talking about? You know how Lily is. She's a clumsy child. Always has been. She bruises like a peach. Her voice was a high-pitched performance of maternal concern. Is that the official story, Mom? She bruises like a peach? I locked eyes with her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her look away, unable to meet my gaze. That's when Mark lumbered forward, grabbing my arm with a surprising strength. "Come on, Jamie," he hissed, his face a mixture of anger and panic. He tried to pull me toward the hallway. "Whatever this is, we can discuss it in private. You're making a scene, man. You're ruining Dad's night." I ripped my arm from his grasp with a force that surprised us both. "I'm done with private discussions, Mark," I snarled, my contempt for him, for his cowardice, boiling over. "Secrets are what got us here. I'm done with secrets." I turned my attention back to my father, the man of the hour. "You want to talk about privacy? How about the privacy of your own kitchen? When you whispered threats to my daughter, my terrified 8-year-old girl." Robert's face, which had been pale with shock, began to mottle with a deep, furious red. "I have no earthly idea what you're talking about," he blustered, his voice shaking. "The boy is clearly not well. He's been under a tremendous amount of stress since Emma. He made the fatal mistake of using my wife's name as a shield." A switch flipped in my brain from cold anger to white-hot rage. "Do not say her name." I articulated each word a block of ice. "You lost the right to even think her name a long, long time ago." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "You want to know what I'm talking about? Fine. The whole world can see what you're talking about." I held the phone up, not just for him but for everyone. I swiped through the photos, each image of Lily's small, bruised arms a fresh indictment. The pictures were sickeningly clear in the warm, ambient light of the living room. There were murmurs of shock, gasps of horror. People who had been standing near him subconsciously took a step back. "The girl needs discipline," Robert finally roared, his carefully constructed facade of the benevolent patriarch completely shattered. He was raw, exposed, and ugly. "You abandoned her. You left her in my care. What did you expect me to do? I was the one doing the hard work. I was the one parenting her when you were off playing architect. I was making her strong, the same way my father made me strong." His twisted, pathetic justification hung in the air, a confession more damning and absolute than anything I could have accused him of. He wasn't denying it. He was defending it. "This isn't strength," I said, my voice now calm and steady. "This is cruelty." And then I pressed play on the video. Lily's small, fragile, whispering voice filled the cavernous silence of the room. "Grandpa." He grabbed my arm. He squeezed it really hard and he shook it and said I was a bad, stupid girl. A woman near the front, a neighbor I'd known my whole life, let out a loud sob and covered her mouth with her hand. My mother looked as though she might collapse. And then I delivered the coup de grace, the move I had been planning for the last hour. "Look, I'm not a doctor," I announced, my gaze sweeping across the room of horrified faces. "I'm just a father." But as it happens, we have a highly respected medical professional in the room with us tonight. I turned and locked eyes with Sarah, who had been watching the entire exchange with a grim, unwavering focus. "Sarah, Dr. Reynolds, you're a pediatrician. You've seen the photographic evidence. You've heard the victim's statement. As a doctor, and as my friend, what is your professional recommendation in a situation like this?" The room parted like the Red Sea as Sarah stepped forward. She didn't glance at the phone again. Her eyes were fixed on my father, her expression a mask of cold, clinical seriousness. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear, calm, and carried the devastating weight of her authority. "My professional recommendation," she stated, her words sharp and precise, "is that this child be immediately transported to a hospital emergency room for a full physical and psychological evaluation by a team that specializes in child abuse cases. Any delay in seeking that professional medical intervention would be, in my medical opinion, grossly negligent and dangerous." She never said the word guilty. She never had to. She had, in the space of 15 seconds, validated my claims, destroyed my father's defense, and professionally advised a course of action that was in itself a damning verdict. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. My father staggered back, his hand clutching his chest as if he'd been shot. My mother let out a low, guttural moan. Then the final domino fell. A man I recognized as a local city councilman, one of my father's regular golf partners, walked deliberately away from my father's side. He came over to me, placed a firm hand on my shoulder, and said, his voice low but audible, "James, I am so profoundly sorry." Another man, a key investor in my father's old firm, caught my eye from across the room, gave a slow, disgusted shake of his head, turned on his heel, and walked straight out the front door without a word. It was over. The 40-year legacy of Robert Mitchell, the man of the people, the builder of bridges, had been reduced to rubble in less than 5 minutes. He was no longer a respected pillar of the community. He was just a violent, pathetic old man, his secrets laid bare for the world to see. I had won. But as I looked down at Lily's small, terrified face, still hiding behind my leg, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the bloody, brutal, and necessary end to a long and terrible war. The silence that blanketed the room after Sarah's pronouncement was a living thing. It was thick and heavy, suffocating the last vestiges of celebration. The party had died a sudden, violent death. The exodus began, not with loud farewells and cheerful goodbyes, but in a funereal procession of quiet, averted eyes and hushed whispers. People scurried out as if fleeing the scene of a terrible accident, their faces a mixture of pity for me and disgust for my father. Each departing guest was another shovelful of dirt on the grave of his reputation. I knelt to Lily, shielding her from the spectacle. "It's time to go home now, sweet pea," I murmured into her hair. "Just you and me. A new home." She nodded wordlessly into my shoulder, her small body limp with emotional exhaustion. I scooped her up, and she wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face so deep she was practically inhaling my shirt. I held her tight. I wanted everyone to see. I wanted them to see her clinging to me, to see the tangible result of his discipline. I turned and started for the door. The remaining guests parted for me, a path clearing through the wreckage. My mother, her face a grotesque mask of smeared mascara and desperation, stumbled forward to block my way. "James, please," she begged, her voice a ragged, pathetic whisper. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. We can talk. We're family." The word family was so obscene in that moment that I actually stopped. I looked at her, at the woman who had applied magic erasing cream to her grandchild's bruises. My voice, when I spoke, was completely devoid of heat or anger. It was a flat, dead thing. "You lost the right to use that word a long time ago," I said. "The moment you chose to protect him instead of protecting her, you stopped being family. You saw what he was doing, and you chose to be his accomplice. Now get out of my way." She flinched as if I had physically struck her, her face crumbling. She shrank back, and the path to the door was clear. As my hand touched the doorknob, my father, who had been standing frozen like a statue of his own ruin, finally erupted. It wasn't a roar of anger anymore. It was the desperate, pathetic bellow of a dethroned king. "You walk out that door and you are no son of mine. You hear me? I'll see you in court. I have rights. I'm her grandfather. Grandparents have rights." I paused at the threshold, my back still to him. I didn't need to see his face to know he was broken. "Go ahead," I said, my voice carrying with chilling clarity back into the silent, cavernous room. "Call your lawyer. I'm sure a judge would be very interested in your definition of rights. I'm sure he'd love to hear you explain how making a child strong involves terrorizing her in the kitchen. You do that because I have photos. I have a video. I have a pediatrician willing to testify. And I have a room full of your closest friends who just heard you confess. So please, Dad, try it. Make my day." There was no reply, only the sound of his own ragged, defeated breathing. The power had shifted, completely and irrevocably. He was nothing. I walked out of that house, Lily cradled in my arms, and I did not look back. The cool night air felt like the first clean breath I had taken in years. I calmly walked upstairs to my old bedroom, retrieved Lily's small pink backpack from behind the dresser, and then proceeded to my car. I strapped Lily, who was now half asleep, into her car seat, making sure Barnaby the bear was tucked in beside her. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the house with its accusatory lights and shattered lives shrinking in my rearview mirror. I drove for 2 blocks, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Then I pulled over to the side of a quiet, tree-lined street, under the dim glow of a streetlight. The adrenaline that had been my fuel for the past 2 hours finally seeped away, leaving a deep, shuddering tremor in its place. I leaned my forehead against the cool plastic of the steering wheel, and for the first time since I'd heard that monstrous whisper, I let myself break. The sobs were silent, but they racked my entire body. Tears of rage for what had been done to her, tears of grief for the family I thought I had, and tears of profound, gut-wrenching relief that she was finally safe with me. After a few minutes, I pulled myself together. I wiped my face on my sleeve, took a long, ragged breath, and picked up my phone. My fingers were still trembling slightly as I found the number. It wasn't the police. That would come later through the proper channels with a lawyer present. This call was different. This was the first step in building our new fortress. A lawyer I knew from my firm, a sharp, no-nonsense guy named David, answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "David, it's James Mitchell. My apologies for the late hour. I'm in a situation. I need you to file for an emergency temporary restraining order and a sole custody modification first thing Monday morning. The respondents are my parents, Robert and Patricia Mitchell." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "You're your parents, James?" "Yes," I said, my voice now cold and clinical. "You heard me right. And David, don't worry about the evidence. I have everything we're going to need, and then some." As I methodically laid out the night's events, I felt a new kind of strength solidifying inside me. The emotional, grieving son was gone. In his place was a father, a protector, a man with a plan. The war was over, but now the work of rebuilding began. I put the car in drive, pulled onto the on-ramp for the interstate, and pointed the car west, driving away from the ruins and toward a sunrise we would have to create for ourselves. The 3 months that followed were a whirlwind of logistics, legal paperwork, and the slow, painstaking work of healing. I abandoned any thought of returning to my life on the West Coast. That life, that high-powered career, belonged to a man who no longer existed, a man who had prioritized blueprints over his own blood. I found us a small, unassuming 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet, leafy suburb of Cleveland. It was 40 minutes from Sarah's house, and the proximity to a true friend, a real ally, felt like an essential anchor in our new, uncharted sea. I burned through a significant portion of my savings to break my West Coast lease, ship our belongings, and pay the security deposit. I had a tense but ultimately successful negotiation with my firm. My boss, a fundamentally decent man to whom I gave the family health crisis version of events, agreed to a fully remote contract. For the first time since Emma's death, my primary job title wasn't architect. It was dad. Our new life was defined by its quietness. It was a stark contrast to the loud, performative drama of my parents' home. Our routine was our religion. Breakfast at the same time every day. A walk to the park in the afternoon. Bedtime stories every single night. I was building a fortress for Lily, not of brick and mortar, but of consistency, safety, and unwavering presence. The most important part of that fortress was Ms. Albright. She was Lily's therapist, a woman with kind, crinkling eyes and a small, sunny office that smelled of clay and paint. Lily was withdrawn and silent in their first few sessions, but Ms. Albright was infinitely patient. She didn't push. She just sat with Lily, letting her be, creating a space where silence wasn't a demand, but a choice. I would sit in the waiting room, my stomach twisted in knots, scrolling through work emails without actually reading them. When Lily would emerge an hour later, she'd be clutching a drawing. The evolution of those drawings became the map of her healing. At first, they were chaotic scribbles in black and dark purple crayon. Angry, jagged lines that spoke of a pain she had no words for. Then, slowly, other colors began to creep in at the edges. A sliver of blue sky, patch of green grass, a small, hesitant yellow sun in the corner. Then one afternoon, she came out of Ms. Albright's office with a drawing she held with two hands, like a precious artifact. She handed it to me without a word. It was a simple picture. Two stick figures, one significantly taller than the other, were holding hands. Around them was a big, bold, slightly wobbly circle, drawn in a bright, determined blue crayon. "Tell me about this, sweet pea," I said, my voice thick. She pointed a small finger at the tall figure. "That's you." Then to the small one. "That's me." Finally, her finger traced the blue line. "And this," she said, her voice full of a newfound certainty, "is the circle of protection. Ms. Albright told me about it. She said we have one now, and no monsters can ever get in." I couldn't speak. I just pulled her into a hug, my eyes burning, and held her as tightly as I could without hurting her. "That's right, baby girl," I whispered into her soft hair. "No monsters allowed. Ever." The legal proceedings were, thankfully, anticlimactic. David, my lawyer, was a shark. He presented a package to my father's attorney that included my testimony, Sarah's professional statement, sworn affidavits from two guests at the party, and the video of Lily's confession. Faced with the certainty of a humiliating public trial, my father folded. He surrendered without a fight. The court granted me sole legal and physical custody and issued a 5-year restraining order against both Robert and Patricia. The legal document was cold, formal, and the most beautiful thing I had ever read. It was a paper shield, reinforcing our circle of protection. I started attending a support group for single parents at the community center down the road. Sitting in a circle of plastic chairs under fluorescent lights, listening to other people's stories of struggle and small victories, I felt a sense of camaraderie I hadn't realized I was missing. I learned that my pain wasn't unique, and that strength often comes from admitting you can't do it all alone. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but a strange premonition made me answer. "Hello," a hesitant, broken voice on the other end. "James? It's your mother." The sound of her voice was a jolt, a phantom limb aching with the memory of a life that was no longer mine. I remained silent. "James, please. I know I'm not supposed to be calling," she began, her voice dissolving into sobs. "The order, I know, but I had to. Your father, he's a ghost of himself. He won't leave the house. People in town, they cross the street to avoid us. His friends don't call. You've destroyed him, James. You've destroyed our family." The breathtaking, narcissistic audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. "I destroyed him?" I finally said, my voice dangerously calm. "Or did he destroy himself and you stood by and watched? You held the matches, Mom. He loved her. He was just trying to be a good grandparent. He comes from a different time. His father was strict with him. The same tired, pathetic excuses. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? To let a little girl see her grandparents? Family is supposed to be about forgiveness. This stopped being about forgiveness the moment you started coaching her on how to hide the bruises," I said flatly. "But let's be honest. Why are you really calling, Mom? Is it because you lie awake at night missing your granddaughter? Or is it because your social calendar is empty and your friends have stopped inviting you to their bridge club?" There was a choked silence on the other end. And then she delivered the final clarifying blow, the words that extinguished the last dying ember of any lingering filial duty I might have felt. "You have to understand," she whispered, her voice cracking with a raw, ugly self-pity. "This has been so hard on your brother. So unfair. Mark's boss. His firm heard about the incident at the party. They called him in and they let him go. They said they were a family-first company, and they couldn't have this kind of scandal associated with them. Your brother is out of a job, James. Because of you." And there it was, the unvarnished, selfish truth. Her grief wasn't for her shattered granddaughter. It wasn't even for her broken husband. It was for Mark, her precious, perfect golden child, whose life had been inconvenienced by the consequences of his own cowardice. Her desperate plea wasn't for reconciliation. It was a pathetic attempt to guilt me into fixing the damage to her favorite son. A profound, final peace settled over me. There was nothing left to mourn, nothing left to wonder about. The fog had lifted completely, revealing the bleak, barren landscape of their character. "That's the price of looking the other way, Patricia," I said, using her first name for the first and last time. "I hope it was worth it." I ended the call and immediately blocked the number. I stood at my apartment window, watching the rain streak down the glass, washing the world clean. It was a new dawn, gray and wet, but a dawn nonetheless. And for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that no shadows from the past would ever touch us here. Our circle was closed. A few weeks after that final, cleansing phone call, we celebrated Lily's 9th birthday. It bore no resemblance to the lavish, performative parties of her past. There was no sprawling guest list, no caterers with silver trays, no mountain of presents wrapped in glossy paper. It was infinitely better. The guest list consisted of 5 people: Sarah and her husband, and 2 of my friends from the single-parent support group and their children. The venue was our small, cozy living room. The catering was 3 large pepperoni pizzas, and the centerpiece was a slightly lopsided, gloriously messy chocolate cake that Lily and I had spent the morning baking, leaving a fine dusting of flour over most of the kitchen surfaces and ourselves. Our apartment, which had sometimes felt quiet and empty, was now filled with the most wonderful sounds in the world. The genuine, uncomplicated laughter of children playing, the easy, comfortable chatter of adults who had seen hard times and found solace in shared understanding. When it was time for the cake, we all gathered around the small dining table. I watched Lily's face, illuminated by the flickering glow of 9 small candles, and I saw a light in her eyes that had been missing for 2 long years. It was a look of pure, unadulterated happiness. She took a deep breath and blew out all 9 candles in a single triumphant puff, as we all cheered. Later that evening, after the last guest had departed and the happy chaos had subsided, Lily and I were curled up on the couch, reading one of her new books. The apartment was quiet again, but it was a comfortable, peaceful silence now, not an empty one. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her new unicorn pajamas soft against my arm. She was quiet for a long time, tracing the pictures in the book with her finger. Then, she looked up at me. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweet pea. Will we ever see Grandpa and Grandma again?" The question didn't carry the weight or the sting it once might have. It was a simple question, born of a child's curiosity, not a survivor's fear. I took a moment, choosing my words with care. "I don't think so, honey," I said honestly but gently. "Not unless they get a lot of help and truly understand that what they did was very, very wrong." But even then, I added, emphasizing the most important part, it would only be if you and only you ever wanted to see them. It would always be your choice. 100%. She seemed to mull this over for a moment, then nodded, a simple, accepting gesture. "Okay." We sat in that comfortable silence for another minute, the only sound the soft turning of the pages. And then she snuggled in closer, looked up at me with those wide, clear eyes, and she said the 7 words that stitched together the last broken pieces of my heart. "I feel safe now, Daddy." I closed my eyes, a wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled me, and I pulled her into the tightest, safest hug I could manage. She was right. We were safe. In the wreckage of the family I was born into, I had lost a father, a mother, a brother. I had lost a history I once cherished. But in that immense loss, I had found something infinitely more valuable. I had found my way back to being a father. I had learned that family isn't an obligation you're born into. It's a fortress you build, a promise you keep, a circle of protection you draw around the people you would die for. And our circle, smaller now, but forged in fire and built on a foundation of truth and love, was finally, absolutely unbreakable. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it touched you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family and doing what's right? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.